Jen Simmons here to talk about the new CSS Grid Inspector for Firefox. It's in nightly. We just shipped it last week, or maybe the week before. A whole new set of tools to make the Grid Inspector for Firefox more robust, more powerful, more awesome. So check it out by going to nightly.mozilla.org and downloading Firefox Nightly if you don't have it already. There's all sorts of pre-release versions of Firefox here. The one you want right now is Nightly. These tools, of course, will land in other versions of Firefox all the way to the release version at some point later in the summer. But if you want to check it out now, it's July 6, 2017 today. Nightly is the place to do it. So here I am in Nightly. We can see here About Nightly. And maybe if you have an older version of Nightly, you can open up this About Nightly box and make sure it's up to date, update it. Nightly updates every night, every day or two, a couple days. It's sort of the whatever we think is finished and ready to be put in Firefox. But of course, maybe it's not completely tested. There could be some bugs. It might be a little wacky, so don't get too upset if something seems a little bit broken. But, you know, for the most part, my experience the last couple of years has been that Nightly is remarkably stable, actually. Things are pretty well baked. They're just not completely ready for the big public, but you're working on building a website, so you should check this out. So let's look at... I have a whole bunch of examples here at labs.jensimmons.com. A lot of them use CSS Grid. Let's look at this one in particular. You can see here that this is actually fairly simple HTML. There's a main element and then a header which has a link, and then there's an H1 and an H2, and then I've got a B, which is going to give me a place to attach that white diamond. And then I've got 4 figures. Each of them is a little image wrapped in a link. So this one, this one, this one, this one. And then I'm using CSS Grid to do a layout that is both responsive and robust, no matter how much content there is. It's always going to work out. And we can have overlap. You could try to do overlap in the past with absolute positioning, but it's kind of weird. This is going to work much better using CSS Grid. So you may know already that if you find in your HTML the place where display grid is written, then in Firefox you can say display grid and find this little tiny icon of a grid, or some people like to call it the waffle icon, and you can click it and it shows you the grid lines. You can see them here in kind of a dark purple, purpley black. This is super helpful. It's been super helpful over the last year to just have ways to see the lines. But it's not really enough. So for example, we want to change the color and make it something a little brighter and make it stand out a little bit more. We might want to see the numbers of the lines. So there's now this new panel called the Layout panel. You can see here where it says Rules, Computed, Animations, Fonts. There's a new one called Layout. And we can check it out, look in here, and see the tools that are here. So the big one is this new grid panel, and we can change the color right here. Let's make it something a little bit brighter, make it stand out a little more. We can also click here and say display line numbers, and the numbers are going to show up. So now I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It makes it easier to position things. Like let's say I want to position this particular box. I can go over here to the rules and I can see that in fact I do want my code to go grid column 3/5, which means I want it to start on line 3 and go to line 5, or grid row 1/3, which means I want it to start on row line 1 and go to row line 3, which in fact it does. And if I messed around and changed this code, I can start to see the effects of what that would do, and be like, well, why did that happen? And why did this happen? And what happens if I change it in this way? What happens if I change it in this other way? Back on the layout panel, we can see, in fact, we can also hover over the different parts of the grid and see what those are. We can see here this particular cell that I'm hovering over right now, it says row 2, column 3, which means row line 2 and column line 3 is where that particular cell starts. It starts on row line 2, it goes to row line 3. It starts on column line 3, it goes to column line 4. So it gets a little confusing with all these numbers, but you'll get the hang of it once you start writing code. It starts to make a lot of sense. Let's look here at another example. This jazz poster that I have used as an example quite a lot over the last year. And you can see here that I've actually got 2 different grids on the page. This might be something that you might not know just looking at the example by itself. You might try to be checking out what this is, and you have to click around and be like, okay, is there a grid on the body? No. Is there a grid on the header? No. Is there a grid on HTML? No. Where are the grids? Grid on main? Oh, display. Right. You don't want to do that. So instead what you can do is you can see this little list, and you can see that, oh, in fact, there's a grid on the main element, and I can click on this little target, and it jumps to main in the HTML. Or I can click on this target, and it jumps to the UL in the HTML. I can turn this one on. I can turn this one on. I've made them different colors so that they would really stand out for this example. This is kind of bright purple, and this one's this bright blue. And in fact, you can see that the grid on the UL is 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4 columns tall, and the one on the main is 6 columns wide. And I can also see by clicking back and forth, that these are in fact right on top of each other, which was my goal when I wrote this code. This is what I wanted them to be, identically on top of each other. This tool can help you with those kinds of things. Extend grid lines infinitely. Maybe you have a way in which you're trying to line something up that's up on the top of the page with things that are further down on the page, and you can extend these lines further along, and that will give you a way to see what's happening all the way down the page. This is maybe not a great example for it, but you can see all kinds of places where you might want to extend the lines further and make sure that things line up in the way that you want them to. Then the other thing that I want to show you is display grid areas. So to do that, I'm going to go over to Rachel Andrews' work, Grid by Example, a really great website. You can check out all these examples of different parts of the CSS Grid specification and what each of those can do. So we're going to find one for grid areas, defining grid areas, and I'm going to click here and say View Example as Full Page, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit, make this bigger, and inspect the element. And I can see here same grid, you know, I can make it a different color. Somehow I really like making these different colors. Let's not show the lines the whole way. Let's just show them in that particular, what is this, div. Display grid areas, I can click and see the grid areas that have been named. Because Rachel's using, if you look over here on the rules, you can see she's using this grid template area syntax, where she's defined between this opening quote and this closing quote, she's defined the first row, where the first cell is going to be empty. She's said empty by using a bunch of dots. And then header, which names this as header and it names this as header. And then the quote closes and there's a space. There's a new quote which says, hey, I'm going to define the next row, please. Sidebar content, which means name this sidebar, name this content, name this content. It can be super helpful to see this particular names and see whether or not we've succeeded at naming things the way that we wanted to, so that when we then place these particular items, they get placed in the places that we expected them to. So in fact, we can turn on the areas and we can say, oh yes, we did in fact name them the way that we expected to name them. Yeah, so check it out. You can go through bunches of different examples and see like, oh, how is it that this got built? How is it that things are working here? It really can be super helpful, especially when you have more than one grid on a page like this one. For example, you can see I've got 5 different grids on the page, and I can kind of jump down to that particular grid and see it. So check it out. Let us know what you think of this tool. I definitely want to hear from you so we can incorporate your ideas and your feedback. We have a long list of ideas that we want to implement, but of course there's always a shortage of time and there are not enough engineers. So hearing from people as a way to know what tools everybody needs the most can help us make sure we set the priorities correctly. And also you'll probably point out things that we haven't thought of, ways in which this tool is really helping you, or ways in which it's really confusing you, or isn't really quite what you need yet. Or maybe you run into a bug, maybe you have a particular example where things are different and we haven't yet covered that particular kind of example. We want to make sure that it works in all use cases. So definitely let us know. You can ping me Twitter DM or jensimmons.com/contact, or there are lots of ways to find me. Let me know what you think so we can incorporate your ideas into this tool and make it really awesome. Check it out, Firefox Nightly for now, CSS Grid Inspector. Thanks.